What is up, everybody? Mr. Jim to my right, Mr. Ryan Muckenhern across from us right now. Ryan, we are going to do one of our obligatory lead balloons today. This must make you so happy.
Yeah, I'm pretty pleased about it.
We got a couple cartridges here. One is for comparison. One is the one we're actually going to talk about. The 7mm shooting times Westerner, commonly referred to as the 7mm STW.
Or 7 Stew.
I like that one.
Old Stewart.
Yep.
Stewie.
Oh, he's got a 7 Stew.
Get a little 7 STW then. Right?
They add a little more powder, make it compelling to the reader.
This. Let's just,
forward
you know
to
what?
it.
Let's just use the rest of our time and do the Stewie impersonations.
Sure.
This one came born from a Wildcat, as many cartridges are.
Yes.
Later became a commercial cartridge.
Yes.
It's a very fast cartridge.
Yes.
I feel like, and this is what I'm for, and I want you to shed some light on this. It started off like very fast, and then did it end just as fast? Was the 7mm STW just like a shooting star?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Wow.
In more ways than one.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of burned up on re-entry.
It's got some favorable numbers attached to it.
Very favorable.
Some attributes.
Talk about this thing. Give us the rundown, Ryan.
Child of the 70s.
It was.
Yeah. So, Mark, you made a really interesting point that I think I've just ignored because maybe I was hatched in the era where this didn't apply. One time when we were talking about fast, flat shooting cartridges, you said these were advantageous to the hunter because we didn't have laser range finding technology.
Correct.
And when you said that, you know, like the camera would pan in on my face and see me looking into the distance, then having that realization that you, being a hunter that's a little bit older than I am, would have.
Is this past? What is this
No,
called?
this is legit.
I'm just
You've
trying to
hunted
get
big
by.
game in a period and in a place where you didn't have a laser rangefinder.
Mm-hmm.
And it was advantageous to have a fast, flat shooting cartridge.
If you wanted to shoot long range, it was a little bit of guesswork.
Yeah. This solved that problem.
Yeah.
Now, some time later, I was hatched. And then by the time I became a Western state hunter or hunted those landscapes that would be conducive for success with a rangefinder, we just had them. And I think it marginalized the need for such cartridge. Nonetheless, I almost had one built.
Really?
Very close. It was waffling between two cartridges.
What was the other?
Was this the
264 Win Mag.
really?
I know
Yep.
which one won.
Neither.
Well, he just said, wait, what?
Neither.
You didn't do either of them?
No, it was a really cool thing.
Yeah.
I had a
In hindsight, it's probably good.
Oh, I think so. I had a 260, and I was like, yeah, it's a good cartridge. Needed more, though. More power, baby. And so I was like, I know what I'll do. I'll get a 7 STW made. Because we had like 4 boxes of 7 STW at the gun shop.
Mm-hmm.
And I take that thing out and I'm like, man, does that look like a rocket ship. And it kind of is.
Put a little window on the side, some fins.
Yep.
I mean, I'd venture to guess, when this became a commercial cartridge, I think 1994 would have been the first. I've got it in my notes here. I think it was, A-Square, 1994, followed by Remington in 1997. But, I mean, in that era, at least to me, in the hunting world that I lived in, you had a 3 to 9, 2.5 to 10, maybe a 4 to 12. Dialing really wasn't a thing. No rangefinders, essentially.
I'll tell you a thing. I think the explosion of fanfare that this cartridge had occurred for all the reasons that you're mentioning, the necessity, and then also VHS tapes, playing videos of hunting in the field.
Sure.
6.5 to 20s and mil dots.
What?
Yeah.
That's not where I was expecting
No.
you to go.
You think that's what was going on?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah. Big magnification, mil-dot reticles on top of hunting rifles with medium to heavy barrels. Kind of like those Beanfield rifles.
Yeah.
People filming it.
Well, maybe.
And guys saying, like, I need that.
Like I said, it wasn't. That's not what I was around. But, you know, I mean, like,
it
we just kind of had what we had. I guess my point being, if you saw a critter, you didn't know how far away it was, you're like, oh, that looks pretty far. It's probably about this because of, you know, experience and guesstimation, and you probably let one rip, and off you go.
Everybody wanted a lightning bolt to just be able to just freely point wherever they chose and just lightning bolt things.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need that much anymore.
Lightning bolt, lightning bolt, lightning bolt. You ever seen that YouTube video?
Oh, I've seen many of those YouTube videos. Yeah.
Go ahead. So what we have here, 7mm STW. In contrast, your classic 7 mag. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see both of them here. They are both belted beauties. What's the parent case of the STW, Ryan?
Well, 8mm Remington Magnum, another lead balloon.
Right? Lead balloon, born of a lead balloon.
Which, two wrongs don't make a right necessarily. Which previously came from the Holland parent case. Yeah. So it's a full-sized H&H case, whereas the 7 Rem Mag is a cropped H&H case.
Gotcha.
Yes. This is to fit in standard actions.
What length action do you need for the STW then?
A big one. Full-length H&H or full Magnum length action, or a Remington 700 long action, because it does fit in there.
Gotcha.
Yep. But, you'd need an H&H length action to handle that.
Is it comfortable to shoot? I can't imagine it is.
There's a lot of powder. It's a big case, very voluminous case, and it's moving projectiles at hilarious velocities.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on the commercial cardboard box side of things, just say safely 200 feet per second faster than the 7 Rem Mag could move something, 100 feet per second faster than a 7 Weatherby could move something.
Mm-hmm.
The hand loader will tell you, ha.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. And there's a lot of case there. There's a lot of space. You can put a lot of slow-burning Magnum powder in there.
Mm-hmm.
And you can propel heavyweight, high BC 7mm projectiles at wild velocities.
Blistering speeds.
Mm-hmm. Like a 140, which would be light for the potential of the cartridge. 3,400 and change.
Ooh.
And, I think a cartridge like this, in my opinion, deserves something like a 160 and up.
Right.
Becomes very difficult to load into a gun and feed it, of course, just because of its size. You can get those north of $3,000 handily.
So the length of the case itself is somewhat limiting when it comes to the projectiles that you put in it?
Correct.
Okay.
Cartridge overall length, and then
right.
subsequently the platform that is put in. So for contrast, you know what else would be good to have on this table would be the new 7mm PRC.
We're going to look back at the wall, which has not been added to in years, but somehow always has what we need.
How'd you say it the other day? The podcast studio provides.
The podcast studio provides.
The 7
it's the room of requirement,
there.
except it's a shelf.
7 PRC.
You know, I almost tried to bring one. We have those.
Certainly we do. Certainly
Are they behind us?
They're behind us.
We're being ambushed.
Well, okay, maybe we don't. Apparently, we don't have a 7 PRC.
Well, we don't
on the
here.
wall.
Podcast studio did
somewhere.
not provide. We have 300 PRC. That's probably where we're getting it mixed.
Impossible, but here we are. I have a fired case for a 7 PRC, and I have a fired case for a 7 Rem Mag, and this will do just fine for today's illustrations.
Ryan, if you could you just... Are any of those that are standing up there?
No, I looked at that. There's a 6.5 BC, but nobody's heard of that.
That's a lie.
Don't even bring it. That's a sore spot with me.
Here we have, in order, a 7 PRC, a 7 Rem Mag, and a 7 STW. And as we had mentioned, the challenge with the STW handling, say, I'm just going to pick on a bullet, 168 ABLR, is if you want the 168 ABLR to do 168 ABLR things at appreciable velocities, you kind of got to seat that thing out on its toenails, or you're going to eke into the powder capacity of the case. And then end up kind of realistically back into 7 Rem Mag territory. So you have a limitation of cartridge overall length that exceeding it will prohibit feeding from like an internal box magazine, because now we're getting into this crazy COAL.
Right.
7mm mag, when loaded properly, twisted properly, and throated properly, can accommodate that. 7 PRC does it from the commercial side of the house. So I could take a 180 grain projectile and I could seat it into the 7 PRC case and really kind of get to about the same performance level by not exceeding that cartridge overall length. It'll also feed out of the gun that I'm running.
Let me ask this question.
Yo.
This question is, this is something that's always bothered me. 7 STW.
Yep.
Very long case.
Big.
You put a long bullet in it. You can't seat the bullet out very far like you might want to do in order to have a lot of room behind the bullet to stuff a bunch of powder. But it started with a long case.
Yes.
So if you're stuffing a bullet down further in the neck than you would like to do, but it started with a long case, in theory, how do you have any less volume than you have in a smaller 7 PRC case with the bullet, same bullet, seated out further?
It's a great question.
How is that any different?
We're going to use...
Other than people will be like, well, I can't shoot it out of a standard length action, which I don't really care about in this particular instance or question.
This is a fired 160 grain Hornady CX.
Yes.
If seated into the 7 PRC case at an appropriate depth, the heel of the bullet just barely gets to about the neck-shoulder junction, or excuse me, the shoulder-body junction.
Yeah.
When done in the 7mm mag, it goes basically to the rebate of the boat tail.
Yeah.
And again, we're talking about cartridge overall length. So understand the nose of this bullet. These two need to end up at about the same cartridge overall length of 3.340.
Okay.
When done in the 7 STW, we're in a better situation, but this bullet didn't exist at the time that this cartridge was made. But you end up with a further cartridge overall length of, not going to feed in my gun.
So that bullet can't be seated even deeper yet in order to achieve the appropriate cartridge overall length to fit in the guns that it's intended for, because of the fact that the neck just isn't designed for, or what is it? Is it the neck that's not designed for bullets like that? Or
no, the neck could handle it. But to do this and not exceed that cartridge overall length, if I was to seat this at a point where I can maintain my max OAL of whatever this dimension is, I've now got that thing seated deep.
Right.
Like deep.
But do you think that it's any different after you've seated it that deep in terms of powder capacity behind the bullet than is the 7 PRC with the bullet seated out further? See what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. You still may end up with a slightly higher amount in that case, but you start slipping off of the efficiency scale very quickly. So you're going to get a diminishing return on like quantity of powder added to case relative to the amount of velocity that you gain.
You're you're kind of out of the case's sweet spot or something?
Correct. Whereas the intelligent design behind like a PRC, for instance, that bullet is seated to that depth point, and the majority of the cartridge capacity internal is used solely for powder.
Okay.
Where it sneaks into that either 7mm mag or this STW considerably.
Maybe even yet another better way of wording my question is essentially if you have the same bullet between the 7 PRC and the 7 STW in this particular example, but this can apply to other things, I think. Same bullet.
Yep. And
you load up the same amount of powder, but in the 7 PRC, the bullet's pushed out further, and in the 7 STW, the bullet's pushed down into the case further. But otherwise, same bullet, same powder charge, essentially. You're going to have better results with the 7 PRC because it's a more efficient use.
I'd have to if it was the same powder quantity, like to the 10th of grain.
I guess, yeah. For the sake of
it would depend on the bulk of the powder and whether or not it's becoming compressed or whether there's an air gap there. So another part of this that would come into play is like, yes, we could probably strong arm the 7 PRC with a 7 STW. In fact, I think definitively we could strong arm that. But we'd have to be careful doing it, because if we start compressing that charge with a bullet, we're going to dramatically change the way that the pressure happens within the case.
Okay.
And you may not be able to safely hit a particular velocity band due to overpressure.
Yeah, okay.
Whereas the PRC, like the case design, is such that you generate the maximum amount of potential in that vessel, that vehicle, for the projectile, and do so without running into pressure issues and appreciate very near performance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just wondering because it's like, I know there are other reasons behind
Yeah.
not going with these monstrous cases like action length and fitting them into a box magazine and things like that. But I didn't know if ultimately, like, when you compare things across the board, if it's just, or really just getting down to like how much powder's in it, what bullets sitting in it.
Yep.
You know what I mean? But
and that's still, I think, mostly 50% true. Like, with more powder, you can always generally get more, but you will sacrifice something. And I think it's like, okay, if you want to use a high BC, high mass projectile in a cartridge like this, you're either going to single load it or you're going to be barely better than a 7 Rem Mag could do it, and barely better than a 7 PRC can do it with less powder.
yeah, because they were designed to do that.
Correct.
Right. I'm following.
Correct.
I'm following.
And I don't know necessarily that I'd put the 7 Rem Mag and the 7 STW while the 7 Rem Mag was designed to handle a heavier bullet more efficiently, because it actually wasn't. The 7 STW was designed to topple the performance that the 7 Rem Mag offered by exploiting all of the dimensions that the action could offer. Make it the biggest case possible, give it the best bullet possible for the time, fill it with Retumbo 7828 H1000, Ramshot Magnum, whatever else was out on the scene at that point in time, and it's the no holds barred approach.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
they took the big motor, dump a lot of fuel in it, make you go bang. Like,
Yep.
Yeah.
Correct. And it did for a short bit, and then it kind of went away really quickly.
Ryan, like you said, it seems like somewhat across the board, you're getting about, 200 feet per second faster. One thing, a question I have, and I don't know if you do or don't know this, but during the period when this cartridge was popular, were the lighter grain bullets, like, I'm seeing some stuff,
120s,
100, 120, 130, 140, were those the more popular selections to garner that screaming velocity?
Yep.
The trend nowadays, we see, like, with a 7 PRC or something like that, like kind of like heavy
High
caliber,
BC,
high BC, 175 grain type projectiles. Were those smaller bullets
Yes.
selected?
Yep.
For that?
And because that number, the velocity figure, was a big one. And with that velocity increase, that energy increase. And energy was a big thing. I knew one guy with a 7 STW. He also had a 7 Rem Mag. And the STW was like when things got very serious. And he had to take a 400-yard shot.
Well, so that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Like,
And just hold on the spine.
We're looking at a time period where 400 yards would be an exceptionally long shot for, I'd say, most people.
Yep.
500 yards,
That guy made it in the magazine.
right.
Yeah.
What's the? I'd be curious, and I don't have it in front of me. I didn't think of this now, but I'd love to look at like what the drop of that of like one of those 130, 140 grainers would be at, like,
Mark,
400, 500 yards.
let's reference geoballistics, which is such a great calculator.
I knew I could bait him into it. It doesn't take much.
No. I'm going to use my 280 Ackley data as a slave for this. And I'm going to... No, I'm not. I'm going to create a new profile.
New profile.
So he had a 7 STW, he had a 7 Rem Mag. The STW was the one where, he appreciated that extra 200 feet per second for flattening trajectory, and then he was a big energy guy. I can remember him telling me, a very young version of me, that the only thing that kills is energy. And what you wanted is to hit that animal and dump all of the energy in it. So he was a major proponent of those, I'm not going to call them frangible because they weren't frangible, but those bullets that expanded really quickly.
Rapid expansion.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Thanks, Mark. So one of those bullets that he was crazy about was the Nosler ballistic tip.
Sure.
And I'm grabbing this profile here. I'm going to give it a 200-yard zero. And I'm going to say we have an 8 twist. I'm going to say we have a muzzle velocity of 3,400 feet per second.
Yeah.
That is fast. We'll give it MOA, and we'll go to our chart. And this is our environmentals here at Vortex. At 500 yards, you need 5.9 MOA of holdover,
Cute.
which is that's plenty flat. If I go right back and I drop that MV down to 3,200, which I think is being pretty liberal with the MV, and I go back to my chart.
What grain bullet is this, Ryan?
140 nozzle ballistic tip.
Okay.
You almost need another full MOA. Not quite.
Yeah. I mean, so, you know,
So
some of
that's, I mean, in terms of, like, in linear terms, you know, that's over 5 inches difference of drop, which is not huge, but it's also not insignificant. And extrapolate that another 100, 200 yards, and now it's significant, right? So velocity does do a really good job of flattening trajectory. And at that point in time, in our understanding as a people shooting things far away, that was a really, really effective way to sort out your long distance needs.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but like it was about like BC wasn't really in the conversation, was it?
No, not for me at that point in time. That was never a thing that was talked about ever.
Speed kills. Velocity is going to get you there. Flat trajectory.
Yep.
Yeah.
And these,
And you know, it's funny, like a lot of these cartridges too, you got to be thinking, I mean, like we talked about, a ton of powder and like big case. It's probably not comfortable to shoot. This is one of those guns that, like, when it goes off, everyone's aware. And those guns are not fun to shoot a lot. And if you don't shoot it a lot, it's hard to gather dope on it.
Yep.
And so if you're not gathering a lot of dope on it, then you better hope that just if you hold dead on, that it's going to just send it and put it down.
Yep.
So it's kind of a swirling loop that you can find yourself in. The bigger and bigger and bigger you go in these,
That's a
the
vicious
more
cycle,
you
Jim.
rely on their flatness just to keep you going.
Yep. And then there was this massive paradigm
I felt
shift.
like you were describing drugs.
Uh,
The more you do, the more you rely on
You know, in a way, Mark, shooting is a drug.
it. It is.
It is.
It is
Big
addicting.
big dopamine hit. Dope. It's
Yep.
Another tie back shooting.
the bigger the drugs, the more that you're just relying on the drugs at that point and not your actual self.
Correct. That's a really
Wow.
good way to look
So
at
I've
it.
heard.
Yeah.
So I've
That's
heard.
a really
gotten
good way
deep.
to look at it.
Anything in my notes here? Anything about the, anything stand out there that you like? Oh, that's an impressive number.
No.
Was this your sheet that had? Wait, why did you have a sheet out that had 458 SOCOM and 223 on it?
I'm also curious. Not sure.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Long and short of it is,
Oh nope, that was my that was me trying to read a paper from about 5 feet
Yeah, I
away.
was like,
Bad eyesight.
oh, did I print off the wrong thing?
No, I saw that. I saw 2.2. Oh, that's just 2.20. I saw 5.6. We all know 5.56 is better.
the 7STW,
Where were we?
absolute cult classic cartridge. Same thing with its parent case, the 8 Rem Mag. If you ever run into somebody who owns an 8 Rem Mag and appreciates what it is, they're very proud to own it. Very proud to own it. Because it is a monstrous cartridge. And it's a cool cartridge, as is the STW. But it very short life. Very short life. Like,
So this, I take it, is a lead balloon that perhaps it just makes sense, and we're okay with it being a lead balloon. We've had others that
Yeah.
were like, "Come on, world,
Bring it back.
What
yeah.
was
But with this one, maybe we're like, it's okay.
what was the displacement on the Trans Am? Was that a 6.6?
I can't think of it off the top of my head. That's a GM product, so generally I don't care.
Or the Firebird?
Also a GM
Yeah.
product, same
Yeah,
car.
same car. But
I like the Firebird.
Though, yeah. No, if they got a big Phoenix on the hood, that's
yeah.
neat.
My buddy Tyler, his dad had a black one with the big Phoenix Firebird on it. I remember it's a 6.6 liter. I think that's what it was.
Sounds about right.
Could be wrong, but it kind of deserved it. It had all those teeth and no toothbrush because it really wasn't that fast. It looked really cool, but it really wasn't that great. And in context, modern context, all those teeth, no toothbrush, really cool, big displacement, not that great for long range. Like at least not in its, like I said, cardboard box factory offering setting.
Yeah.
If you were a good hand loader and you had a good riflesmith that you could set this thing up appropriately to handle the high BC projectiles, and you were okay with like sled loading it, for instance, made a lot of sense. And there's a lot of cartridges that are like that. 300 Rum is a great example. Massively capable 30 caliber Magnum. Load it to its real potential. You can't put it in a magazine. You got to single feed it. And now other cartridges have come out that will emulate, duplicate, and potentially even exceed that cartridge's performance in a factory offering.
Right.
That will feed reliably out of the gun. 300 PRC, for instance.
Right. That's what I was.
Yeah, great. And, it's just now the merits of the cartridge of that time frame, that 1970 to 1999.
Late 90s.
Yeah. There's a lot of them that were in there that they just kind of like, well, it worked, but it didn't work optimally. Here's the optimal choice. And it's a cartridge like 7 PRC or 300 PRC for those two examples. Or for that matter, 7 SOM, another lead balloon, 7 Wisdom, another lead balloon.
I know. I like both those cartridges, actually.
There's great cartridges.
I got another dumb Jimmy question to add to the mix here, but for the sake of conversation, we've talked about in the past a number of different gun-related, cartridge-related podcasts, how in the firearms industry we see trends sometimes just resurface just for the sake of having a new trend. It seems like we like to have something new to ogle about, even if it's something that's actually quite old.
Like the every 10-year reappearance of the Scout rifle.
Yes. That's what. Yeah, that was one that's top of my mind.
10 years.
It must come back. But we must put more pick rails on it. So this seems like one that I have a hard time imagining coming back, although I can't ever count the world out, right, in the things that they prefer.
Yeah.
No one ever would have thought that women wearing giganto, chunky, ugly shoes would come back, but it sure did. Anyway, because now we've gone to like little cute cartridges that have just like perfect little amounts of powder in them, and they shoot this just absolutely barely appropriately sized bullet, but they do it in such just an efficient and graceful way that they fly through the air, high BCs, this, that, and the other thing, and that's what people think is cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, will it ever come back to just like raw horsepower and rock and roll and just like make it as big as possible and absolutely try to melt the sound barrier? Like,
I think
Jim, I'm sorry. I'm still,
because now we have rangefinders, now we have ballistics calculators, now we have all this other stuff. I don't know if this is one that's going to come back.
I know where you're coming from.
I'm still reeling from the fact that somehow Jim wove into this conversation what is or isn't sensible women's footwear.
I'll tell you what isn't. All we need to do is go walk downtown and look at the ground.
All right.
I'm with you.
But then we'd have to go downtown. I don't want to go there.
So in a way, it kind of is already happening. So I can remember when the big magnums, and I'll put 7 Rem Mag in a big magnum category. I think because the gusto socially was like, oh, this big magnum says magnum belt. Anyway, that was very in vogue. 300 Win Mag, 300 Rum, 300 Wisdom, 7 Rem Mag. And that was like a very defining criteria for success as hunters and shooters.
Oh, classic. More.
Yeah.
And then, and really at that point in time, that 1,000-yard window was like the furthest we could play, and it was probably a technology thing. Certainly, there were shooters that were expressing impacts at further distances. And then we entered 2007, that nifty little cartridge 6.5 Creedmoor came out, and we entered a new era of mastering exterior ballistics. And to your point, like you've modeled the most efficient cartridge possible, so the smallest powder charge with like you said, this razor margin bullet that absolutely exploits every bit of its puzzle or its build to be able to shoot efficiently, effectively at that same window and space. So we have like competitions like PRS come out where their max window of operation is probably 1,200 yards.
People get all excited when they pull the trigger and nothing happens in terms of recoil, but the bullet goes and you just hear like tink, and they're like, yeah.
There's something magical.
Hell yeah,
about
brother.
It. Well, I think that's impressive.
Because
you see these essentially these baby little things compared to something like this STW doing, you know,
you've gotten to crunch the numbers
effective.
and problem solve to make it all work.
Yep. And so 6.5 Creedmoor, not to pick on that cartridge, but really occupied a lot of space, from big game hunting to precision rifle shooting to recreational long range just for fun. Like held fast, still is holding fast.
Some duty use.
Yeah. And then I think we kind of went back to that first segment of shooting thought where more is better. And we have 6.5 PRC. And then we had 300 PRC. And then we have
6.5 BC.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And
Damn, that's the second time.
And now I'm seeing more of these larger format cartridges coming in every year, but a completely different user group. And it's almost to me like there's an interesting trend in that you start, and I did this personally, you start on the way overcompensated end of the scale. Mm-hmm. And like I put together, God's honest, more 300 PRCs, more 7 PRCs, and more 6.5 PRCs with first focal plane, high magnification rifle scopes this year for hunting whitetails in Wisconsin.
I was going to say for the Wisconsin deer season.
Yep. Than I thought actually possible. And high-end builds, carbon this, carbon that, magnesium chassis this. I think what will end up happening is as that shooter becomes more educated in the kung fu that is hunting and shooting long range, they'll step back from that and they'll get into this hyper efficiency. And so maybe you're just seeing
But do you think that the hyper efficiency folks will then step up into the...
No, I think they just get smaller and smaller.
That's where you think this all goes.
Until they disappear.
I think they get
We need to keep making giganto cucamongas for all the new people who think that they need more with an A, M-O-A-R. And then but everything just keeps filtering down to
It's interesting because you're at least, or what you just said made me think of it in this way. But we're seeing this new era of hyper efficient cartridges, and you've got hyper efficient cartridges getting smaller, and hyper efficient cartridges getting bigger. Like they're kind of
the PRCs are they're not just like raw, unadulterated, throw as much power. Like there's still a lot of like intelligence to them, but they are still big.
And then also, Ryan, I guess with that, divergence of hyper efficient cartridges, at what point does it all converge back on the 308?
6.5. Oh, sorry.
Pretty quick, Mark. Comes back pretty quick. You make a really good point. One really stellar example that I'm seeing talked about a lot more is 300 Norma.
Okay. You know what? So I was hearing a lot about that.
300 Norma.
I want to say 6 years ago.
And
that's what I was hearing about.
Almost always in ELR context.
Yeah.
And now I'm hearing about 300 Norma as my I don't care how far away that elk, moose, mule deer, caribou, pronghorn, bear is, the 300 Norma will sort that out. And so there's, to your point about this secondary convergence, a lot of those shooters that I know that are running that gambit are shooters who are extremely effective in exploiting the 0 to 1,000 yard attributes of cartridges like 6 Dash or 6 GT, 6.5 Creedmoor, 6 Creedmoor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they're like, yeah, I'm really good at this. Now I need something that is like, I don't care about wind. I don't care about how much tissue I need to push through. I don't care about shot angle. I want an absolute meteor strike.
A death ray.
Yeah, and 300 Norma. 300 PRC as well. I know, especially in like the American Southwest, Luke Horak at Arrowhead Rifles puts a lot of 300 PRCs and a lot of 300 Normas together for guys and gals shooting coos deer, the smallest whitetail.
Oh, those poor things.
Yeah, at long distances. I would wager a guess that says most of his shooters that he's running are pretty proficient shooters and have a good handle on how all these things work, right?
Yeah.
And so, there is that secondary convergence. Your point exactly. And when does it all come back around? I think on the second or third rebarrel, or when you go on a trip and you're like, yep, I got one, 321 yards, my 300 PRC. And I did high shoulder shoot it, and I was able to salvage 2 hindquarters and two-thirds of a backstrap, and maybe they come back to.
I didn't want.
It's true though.
I didn't want the front anyway.
That's how it works a lot. And the funny thing is that people were going for this stuff. Now, maybe again, it made more sense when in the era when there was less technology, and so you just had to kind of hold for hair and hope for the best. But people love to sort of start out just trying to just have no doubts in their mind. They're like, I want to get the thing that has gives me ultimate confidence. And then the more you learn, and then the more you learn and the more you experience, the more you start to realize that thing that you thought was maybe perfect for everything and you didn't have to think about anything is actually only okay at a lot of things and actually has a lot of annoying attributes just about any time you use it. And so then you start to whittle your way into a more curated, perfected solution for your particular use.
But I think you can only do that with the advances in technology that we've had.
That and experience.
That and experience. But like, if you want to be able to shoot critters at 400 or 500 yards that, heck, maybe it's actually 350, maybe it's 450. You don't know, like during that time, that was your problem solver.
I understand. Yeah.
It eliminated, it gave you a margin of error.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. But to Jim's earlier point, like if I was to set forth with a 7 STW and an ultralight rifle, my typical choice, right? I'd have a hard time getting good with it.
Oh, there's drawbacks.
I would have to
right?
lean. I would have to lean on the fact that it is a very fast and flat shooting cartridge to, I think, be successful with it. If I were to woe back and pick 708, if I was crazy about 7, that I could shoot way more often, I bet I could get way more deadly with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the technology thing, to your point, Mark, that comes in, like you and I were just shooting the other day to a grand with a rifle that's got no business playing at a grand.
No.
16-inch 308. And we used technology, and we were successful.
Were they going subsonic? Maybe.
1,079 feet per second at the berm. By golly, we did it.
Yeah,
we had some impacts.
Yeah,
it happened.
So it was one of those. It was one of those cartridges, that 7 STW, that it was the we have this much space, let's fill it.
Let's fill it.
Let's use it.
Yep. And that's not a.
If you build it, they will fill it.
It's not a bad way to play. There are better ways to do it, as we have discovered. Moving forward, see cartridges like 7 PRC.
Yes, but at the time,
That was the answer.
look at all the things. It's huge. It's got a belt, like you mentioned. It's a, you know what I mean? Like, it's got all the things of that era that a person would be looking for and place a high precedence on. I do want to, before we go, I want to give credit where credit is due. Mr. Lane Simpson, who I believe was a field editor for Shooting Times,
Developed the cartridge.
Yes. So, hence, Shooting Times Westerner.
Yep.
And then now we have a 6.8 Western.
Different. Very different.
I know they're different. I'm just saying they both carry the same.
I think
The old shooting time waster.
I think we should. It does cut down on your shooting time, though.
Yep. Pop one round off. Did it hit a pie plate? Yes. Thank God I'm done.
I think we should do the Shooting Times Alaskan next.
I was reading about that too.
Yeah, nice, cool cartridge. Actually, no, we should do. No, we did 8 Rem Mag, I think. Did we do 8 Rem Mag?
It's been brought up. I know at least.
That's a lead balloon. They're all lead balloons.
There's a lot of them out there.
There's a few. Yep. You know who else had a belt? Batman. That's all I've got to say about that.
Correct.
Yeah. Got that right.
Correct. Yeah. Well, awesome. Did we leave anything on the table?
No,
with
cool.
The old 7 STW?
Cool gun. Every time I see one, there's always a very interesting story about how it came to be or why it came to be.
Like for that person, you mean?
Yep.
Like how they, yeah.
Yep. There's always it's never just a Model 700 CDL.
You know what? You're right. There are some cartridges out there that are always like weird story cartridges.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And it's like if you hear someone kind of like, check this out, I got this from my, the house burned down. We went in the root cellar and this, and you can almost be like, I'm not going to be surprised when they tell me it's like a 7 STW,
Yep.
or like, there's a couple of other cartridges that come to mind. And they're like, yeah, it's in like a 35 whatever, and you're like, yep, I actually kind of saw that coming.
That fits.
Right.
Yeah. So I bet when folks who are fans of the cartridge chime in, it's like I had it built, or it was bought for this super specific reason. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, or like this belonged to Sturgill Simpson.
Yeah.
You're like, okay.
they're never mundane.
Well, maybe we'll end on that.
Okay.
Number one, thank you guys. Thanks everybody for listening. And if you have a 7 STW, what rifle is it, and what's your story?
Yeah,
let us know.
I bet it's cool.
Yeah, I bet it's cool
It'd be
too.
the best comment section we ever had.
I hope
if
so.
we find some.
Awesome. Thanks everybody. We'll catch you on the next one.
See ya.
Bye.